Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan is Dorothy Bain, the Lord Advocate's visit today to the Scottish Parliament to not answer questions that she was asked. Well, she gave an answer, but it wasn't really relevant to the question. So I'm using the Scottish Daily Express's reference on this, a piece by David Walker. Headline is Dorothy Bain insists she shares collective position of SNP ministers in a rare Holyrood appearance. The Lord Advocate finally appeared in front of MSPs at the Scottish Parliament to answer questions about the Post Office Horizon scandal and insisted it was never her position to oppose mass exoneration of victims. My understanding is slightly different, so I must have been wrong. So, Scotland's Lord Advocate has insisted that she shares the collective position of SNP ministers as she made a rare appearance at Holyrood to answer questions from MSPs. Dorothy Bain was called on to give evidence about the Crown Office role in the Horizon Post Office scandal. She spoke days after a new emergency bill was introduced at the Scottish Parliament, which will see a mass exoneration of Scots sub-postmasters who were wrongly convicted due to faulty Horizon evidence. The Scottish Government became embroiled in a cross-border row after Westminster declined to legislate for them, citing the separate legal systems. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And the other odd thing we had, in Scotland, unlike the rest of the United Kingdom, the Scottish Crown Office prosecuted these people. In the rest of the United Kingdom, it was the Post Office that prosecuted these people. There was a big, massive difference. So it was kind of difficult to have a one-glove-fits-all response to this. However, Miss Bain's previous public comments on the scandal also called into question whether she backed a blanket exoneration of victims, which is what the new legislation will do. But she rejected the suggestion on Thursday, pointing out that as a member of the government cabinet, she needs to support their policies. Now, my understanding, rightly or wrongly, previous information that was available, I thought Dorothy Bain had the opinion that exoneration should be done on a case-for-case basis. That's where my head was with it. Now, I might have dreamt that. I might have read it in a made-up newspaper. But that's certainly where I had her opinion on this, which kind of made sense to me. Not saying that that's some of the Horizon people were guilty or not guilty, but if you wrote a legislation saying that everybody done for fraud between certain timescales was to be let off, then you could be letting off somebody who had stolen money. So I think to look at each case, although it would maybe delay things, I could see the benefit in that. I'm not saying any of them shouldn't be exonerated. I'm not saying any of them did break the law. What I'm saying, though, is you just go through each case individually. There can't be that many cases in Scotland and go, yep, that one's fine, that one's fine. And you might get them all done and say, yep, every one of them were convicted incorrectly and unsafely. So we exonerate these people. And that's where I thought Dorothy Bain's opinion was previously. However, Scottish Tory Justice spokesman Russell Finlay welcomed the fact that she'd finally been hauled in front of MSPs but asked her a number of questions about the scandal. He said in her statement, the Lord Advocate said that she has not previously opposed mass exoneration as this bill proposes. Now, that was the impression given by her in previous statement in January. I don't have a copy of previous statement in January, but obviously that's where I was getting this from as well. So I'd like to ask her to use this opportunity to be clear whether or not she agrees with her cabinet colleagues that mass exoneration is the right thing to do. It's also regrettable that the SNP has sought to turn this into yet another excuse to pick a constitutional fight with UK ministers. In their own words, the Scottish Government now recognises the need for a standalone Scottish legislation. It's also regrettable that the Scottish Government now suggests that the passing of this bill can only happen after the UK law has passed. I'd urge the Scottish Government to have confidence in this Parliament to commit to passing this legislation before the summer. We have the power to do so. He is correct. Ms Bain pointed out that the government bill reflects their position and that, like all ministers, I share that collective position. She claims that her comments previously were taken out of context, and she was instead stating that she did not have the power to grant blanket exoneration. Now, this is quite a strange thing. This is the same as a committee or a boardroom of directors of a company, that if there's 10 people on the board of the committee and you make a decision and it's, whether it's 64 or 91 or 10-0, it doesn't really matter. Once the decision's made, that is a collective decision for that board or committee or group. So that's what she's saying here. She's still not saying she agrees or disagrees. She's just repeating that she shares the collective position. Not whether she agrees with it or not, which was the question she was asked. And what I think's happening here is she kind of knows it. The actual result of the cabinet meeting is opposite to her personal and private and professional opinion, which is a bit weird because she's not part of the SNP. She's not been voted into the Parliament, but yet she sits on the cabinet. And I was understanding that her role was to be independent and to give advice. I also believe that when Nicola Sturgeon tried to take the case of a second referendum to court, the advice given by the Lord Advocate at that point was she was wasting her time, but she went anyway, and then the Lord Advocate had to go and defend the Scottish position, which I thought was bloody bizarre. But it certainly looks like that's what's happening here. Instead of just saying, yes, I agree with the position, or no, I don't, spouting this, I share the collective position. Of course you do, because that's kind of how committees, groups, and boardrooms operate. She also gave an update on the current position of the Scottish Rising cases, with 6 being quashed so far, 2 currently before the appeal court and 10 more before the Scottish Criminal Case Review System. She also announced that she had stripped the Post Office's status as a specialist reporting agency because of its fundamental and sustained failures, and added that it was not fit to be specialist reporting agency, meaning it can no longer able to investigate and report allegations to the Crown. And Ms Bain also addresses complaints that the Crown Office continued to convict using faulty arising evidence after a summit in 2013 where they were told about the issues with it. She confirmed that 4 cases have been identified which took place between 2013 and 15 and involved horizon data and guilty pleas, but blamed the Post Office for this. So the Crown Office were aware in 2013 that there was issues, accepted 4 guilty pleas from people who evidently weren't guilty, but it's the Post Office's fault. This is just outrageous, isn't it? Speaking afterwards, Mr Finlay insisted the Lord Advocate still had questions to answer. He said, following multiple Scottish Conservative requests, the Lord Advocate rightly returned to Parliament, but many questions remain unanswered. We still don't know whether or not she believes in legislation blanketing exoneration of horizon victims. That's a fair point, because she's not answered the question. Dithering SNP ministers also need to stop using the UK legislation as a phony excuse to delay the Scottish bill. They need to get on with it for the sake of the Post Office victims. Former Lord Advocate Frank Mulholland was in charge during the mass miscarriage of justice, and it's only right that he should also come to Parliament. That sounds fair and logical and a bit of common sense, so that'll not last long in the Scottish Parliament. So there we go. It's a totally bizarre situation, this, and it just shows up things that I just think's crazy about the current setup at Holyrood, where this position, it doesn't matter that Dorothy Bain, whoever the personality is, but this position of Lord Advocate is this sort of dual role in Scottish judicial and politics, where they're the advisor to the government and also the head prosecutor in Scotland. And it's a strange thing. And, Ms Bain didn't create the position, she only accepted the position. But she doesn't really help herself in situations like this, where just answer the question. If you don't like to answer the question, don't take the job. But that comment about what happened between 2013, where there was 4 sub-postmasters pled guilty, which was usual for all these people because they were told if they didn't, they would go to jail. And we, as a nation, still prosecuted 4 people after the Crown Office were told that this system was unsafe. That beggars belief. And I quite agree with the Tory guy who asks that Frank Mulholland, the ex-Lord Advocate, should also go to Parliament, because that's a massive question there. Why were these 4 people put through after 2013 when the Crown Office in Scotland were made perfectly aware that the system was faulty? Absolutely bonkers. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please subscribe. But most importantly of all, unless you're any of these idiots that carried on prosecuting people when the evidence suggested that the system was wrong, everybody else have a great day. Cheery, bye now.